Armin sat by the window of his small apartment, watching the busy road below. Cars moved without pause. Horns filled the air and people hurried as if time was chasing them. He had lived in the city for years, but lately every sound and every light felt heavy on his mind. He worked in an office filled with computers, papers, and endless tasks. Every day felt the same, and every evening he came home too tired to think about life. He wanted peace, not noise. He wanted fresh air, not smoke. One evening after work, Armin went for a walk through a small park near his home. It was one of the few green places left in the city. Children played near the swings and a few birds sang from the trees. He stopped near a bench and sat down. The cold breeze touched his face, and for a moment he felt calm. That small moment made him think deeply. He asked himself what would happen if he left everything and started again somewhere quiet. The thought stayed in his mind like a small flame that refused to go out. A week later, he visited his friend Aslam, who was a traveler. Aslam had spent many months exploring mountains and forests. Armin told him about his tiredness and his wish to escape the city. Aslam smiled and said that life in nature was not easy, but it was real. He told Armin about a forest he had once visited, far from the city, where a river ran between green hills. There were no towns nearby, only trees, birds, and a clear sky. The place was peaceful and full of life. Armin listened with growing interest. He felt something inside him wake up. That night he could not sleep. He imagined himself walking through tall trees, hearing the wind in the leaves and drinking water from a river. He imagined a small cabin made of stone, smoke rising from a chimney, and a small garden full of plants. The picture felt so real that he could almost smell the fresh earth. The next morning, Armin made a decision. He would leave the city. He spent the next few weeks planning his move. He sold most of his things, kept only the tools and clothes he needed, and saved as much money as he could. His friends thought he was joking when he told them about his plan. Some said he would return in a few days, others laughed and said he was dreaming. But Armin stayed quiet. Deep in his heart, he knew this was not a dream. It was something he had to do. When the day came, he packed his backpack with food, a map, a small tent, and a few tools. He took a bus that went far from the city and got off near the edge of a forest. The road ended and a narrow path began. The sound of cars slowly faded behind him. He took his first step into the forest. The air was cooler and clean. He could hear birds calling and the rustle of leaves. Every step took him deeper into the woods, and every breath made him feel alive. He walked for hours, following the sound of running water. By afternoon, he reached a small river. The water was clear and small fish moved in it. He knelt beside the river, filled his bottle, and drank. It was the freshest water he had ever tasted. Nearby, there was a flat area with soft grass and tall trees that gave good shade. He decided to rest there. As the sun began to set, Armin set up his small tent. The sky turned orange, and a few birds flew home to their nests. He lit a small fire and cooked rice with vegetables he had brought. The smell of smoke mixed with the cool air. Sitting by the fire, he felt a peace he had not felt in years. The forest was quiet except for the soft sounds of the night. Crickets sang and the river flowed gently nearby. He looked up at the sky and saw more stars than he had ever seen in the city. The next morning, Armin woke early. Mist floated above the river and the sunlight broke through the trees. He took a deep breath and smiled. He knew this was the place he wanted to stay. He started walking along the river to find a spot where he could build his new home. After walking for a while, he reached a rocky hill that had a flat area halfway up. The ground there was strong and the view of the forest was wide. He decided that this was the right place to build his cabin. He spent the next few days exploring the area. There were many stones near the river, perfect for building. There were also wild fruit trees nearby and a small open space that could be used for farming. He built a small shelter using branches and leaves while he started collecting stones. Each day he carried them to the hill and stacked them in piles. His hands became rough, but he felt proud of the work. Every stone he lifted made him feel stronger and more free. One evening, while gathering stones, he noticed deer drinking water from the river. They looked at him for a moment but did not run away. He stayed still and watched them. He felt like he was becoming part of the forest, no longer an outsider. The fear he once had of being alone slowly faded. The forest was not lonely. It was full of life. By the end of the first week, Armin had cleared a small space on the hill and marked the area for his cabin. He worked every day from morning until sunset. When he got tired, he rested under the trees and listened to the sounds of nature. He learned how to use stones and mud to make strong walls. It was slow work, but each day he saw progress. At night, he would sit by the fire and think about how far he had come. The city lights and traffic were just memories now. The forest had become his new world. He did not need noise, tall buildings, or crowded places anymore. He had the stars, the river, and the sound of the wind through the leaves. He felt something growing inside him, a sense of peace and strength that he had never known before. Armin looked at the half-built wall of his stone cabin and smiled. This was just the beginning. He knew the road ahead would not be easy, but for the first time in his life he felt ready. The forest had accepted him, and he was ready to build his new life from the ground up. Armin woke before the sun, as the soft light slowly entered the forest. The air smelled fresh, mixed with the scent of damp soil and leaves. He stretched his tired muscles and looked at the small shelter he had made with branches. It was not much, but it protected him from the wind and the morning dew. Today he planned to start building the real cabin. He carried a small bag with tools and went to the pile of stones he had collected the day before. Each stone was heavy, but he did not complain. The thought of a strong home waiting for him gave him energy. He worked steadily, stacking stones carefully. He learned to choose stones that fit together without gaps. He mixed mud with water to make a strong paste, and each wall slowly began to rise. By noon, he had finished one corner of the cabin. He paused to drink water from the river and eat a piece of bread. Sitting on a flat stone, he looked around. Birds flew from tree to tree, and a fox crossed the path nearby. The forest was alive, and he felt like it welcomed his presence. Days passed, and Armin continued building. He found that the work was not just physical. It was also a test of patience. Some stones were too heavy to lift alone, and some walls collapsed when he made a mistake. At first he felt frustrated, but he reminded himself that building anything worth having required effort. Slowly his skills improved. He learned to balance stones better, to use smaller stones as support, and to plan his work carefully. Each day ended with tired arms and aching back, but also with satisfaction. While working, Armin discovered other resources around him. There were fallen branches that could be used for firewood and long vines that could tie stones together when needed. He found wild herbs near the river that smelled good and could be used for cooking. A small hill nearby had clay that he used to mix with water to strengthen the walls. Nature provided everything he needed. He just had to notice it. One morning, while carrying stones up the hill, Armin heard a sound behind him. He stopped and listened. The wind moved through the trees, but he also thought he heard voices. Curious, he followed the sound and found an old man sitting near the river. The man had a long white beard and calm eyes. He wore simple clothes and carried a wooden staff. Armin greeted him carefully. The old man smiled and said hello. The man's name was Harun. He had lived in the forest for many years and knew its secrets. He told Armin about safe paths, where to find fresh water, and which plants were useful. Armin listened carefully, thankful for the guidance. Harun did not stay long, but his advice helped Armin avoid mistakes. He felt lucky to meet someone who respected the forest as much as he did. Back at the cabin site, Armin worked with more confidence. The walls were taller now, and he could see how the sunlight would enter through the windows. He planned a small kitchen area, a sleeping corner, and a space for storing tools. He realized that living in the forest required planning. He had to think about food, water, shelter, and safety. Each step was a lesson, and he learned quickly. Armin also started thinking about farming. He cleared a small patch of land near the cabin where the soil was soft. He dug small holes and planted seeds he had brought from the city: carrots, beans, and tomatoes. He watered them carefully and placed stones around the young plants to protect them from animals. Farming was slow work, but he enjoyed it. Every new leaf that appeared made him smile. The idea of growing his own food felt like magic. At night, Armin would sit by the fire. The stars were bright above him, and the river quietly flowed nearby. He cooked simple meals, sometimes fish he caught from the river, sometimes vegetables from his small garden. The taste of freshly cooked food eaten in the quiet forest was different from city meals. It was simple but full of life. He felt a connection to the land that he had never felt before. Sometimes he faced challenges. Heavy rain made the ground muddy, and strong wind knocked down part of the wall he had built. He learned to repair damage quickly and to make the cabin stronger. He realized that living in nature required patience, courage, and attention. Each challenge made him stronger and more confident. One afternoon, while gathering firewood, he noticed smoke rising far in the distance. Curious, he decided to follow it carefully. After walking for a while, he saw a small village at the edge of the forest. People were friendly and curious. They offered him food and shared stories about the forest. Armin realized that even though he wanted solitude, it was good to know that people lived nearby. The village could provide help if he ever needed it. By the end of the first month, the cabin's walls were complete, and the roof was ready to be built. Armin used wooden logs for support and carefully arranged them. He covered the top with leaves and mud to make it strong and waterproof. Finally, he made a small doorway and a window. Standing back and looking at his work, he felt proud. The cabin was not big, but it was strong, safe, and his own. It represented a new life, built with hard work and patience. After finishing the cabin, Armin focused on farming. He expanded the small patch of land, planted more seeds, and built a small fence to protect the crops. He studied the sun and rain, learning when to water the plants and when to let them rest. He discovered which vegetables grew best in the soil and which herbs could be used for medicine. Life was simple but full of learning. Every day had a purpose and every task brought satisfaction. Armin also enjoyed the small wonders of the forest. He saw deer near the river in the morning, watched squirrels collecting nuts, and listened to birds singing all day. He discovered hidden flowers and watched butterflies move from plant to plant. The forest taught him patience, observation, and respect. He felt that he was no longer rushing through life. Every moment mattered and every experience was beautiful. One evening, as the sun set, Armin sat outside his cabin. The sky turned orange and pink, and the river reflected the colors like a mirror. He thought about the city he had left behind. The noise, the rush, the crowded streets, all of it felt distant and unimportant. Here he had freedom, peace, and purpose. He understood that happiness was not in buildings or money, but in simple living, in working with his hands, and in being connected to nature. As night came, Armin went inside the cabin, lit a small lamp, and wrote in a notebook. He wrote about his daily work, the plants he had planted, and the animals he had seen. He wrote about his feelings and the lessons he learned. Writing helped him reflect and remember every small moment of joy. He realized that life in the forest was not easy, but it was real. It was a life he had chosen, and every effort felt meaningful. By the end of the second month, the cabin was ready to live in, and the small farm was growing well. Armin felt stronger, happier, and more alive than ever. He had left the city to escape noise and stress, and he had found something more valuable: peace, freedom, and a life connected to the earth. He knew that the journey ahead would have more work, but he was ready. The forest had become his home, and he had become part of it. Armin woke early as usual, hearing the soft rustle of leaves and the distant call of birds. The air smelled fresh, and the morning sunlight filtered gently through the trees. He stretched his arms and looked at the cabin he had built. The walls were strong, the roof firm, and the small garden outside was growing well. It had been a few months since he left the city, and the forest now felt like home. Today, he decided to explore the forest further. He packed a small bag with food, water, and a notebook, and started walking along a narrow path he had discovered before. The path twisted between tall trees, over small streams, and through open patches of grass. Armin enjoyed the sound of his footsteps on the earth. Every new area he saw filled him with excitement, and he felt like a child discovering the world for the first time. After walking for an hour, he reached a small waterfall hidden behind a wall of trees. Water fell into a clear pool, making a gentle, calming sound. Armin knelt and filled his bottle with the cool water. He watched fish swim in the pool and saw a family of birds drinking at the edge. The waterfall became his favorite place. He returned there often to rest, drink fresh water, and enjoy the peaceful sound of flowing water. Back at the cabin, Armin decided to improve his farm. He dug deeper holes, added small stones around the plants to protect them, and built a simple irrigation system using the river water. The crops grew faster now, and he could see the first tomatoes turning red. He felt proud of what he had created. Every morning he watered the plants, pulled out weeds, and checked the soil. Farming taught him patience, observation, and care. Armin also started keeping track of the animals he saw in the forest. Deer often walked near the river, and sometimes foxes visited at night. Squirrels and rabbits were common, and birds of many colors moved through the trees. He made sketches in his notebook and wrote down notes about their behavior. Over time, he noticed patterns. The animals were active at certain times and rested at others. Observing them made him feel connected to life in a way he had never experienced in the city. One morning, while checking his crops, Armin noticed a small hole near the fence. A rabbit had tried to get inside. He quickly fixed the fence and added some stones around the corners to prevent it from happening again. It was a small problem, but it reminded him that living in the forest required attention to detail. Every action mattered. He learned to adapt, to solve problems calmly, and to think ahead. The seasons began to change. Spring brought new flowers, soft rain, and longer days. Summer was warm, with sunlight streaming through the trees. Armin enjoyed the changing weather. He planted more seeds, trying new vegetables and herbs. Some grew well and some failed, but he learned from every attempt. He discovered the joy of tasting fruits and vegetables he had grown himself. There was no comparison to anything he had eaten in the city. As the months passed, Armin grew stronger. Carrying stones, digging soil, and building structures improved his body. His arms and legs were firm, and he felt full of energy. The work was hard, but it gave him confidence. He realized that life in the forest required physical effort, but it also gave back much more than it demanded. Each day he felt more alive, more aware, and more content. One evening, a sudden storm arrived. The wind shook the trees, rain poured heavily, and thunder echoed across the forest. Armin ran to secure the cabin and checked the roof. He moved furniture and plants to safe areas. During the storm, he lit a small lamp and sat inside, listening to the rain on the roof. It was frightening, but also beautiful. The storm reminded him of nature's power, and he respected it deeply. By morning, the sun returned, and everything was calm again. Some plants were bent and a few branches had fallen, but nothing serious. Armin worked quickly to fix the damage and felt satisfied that he could handle difficulties. During one of his walks near the river, Armin discovered a hidden patch of wild berries. They were small, red, and very sweet. He picked some to eat and decided to plant a few near his garden. Soon he had a new crop growing alongside his vegetables. He learned to mix wild plants with cultivated ones, creating a balance between farming and nature. The forest offered lessons and gifts for those who paid attention. Armin also built a small wooden bench near the river, using fallen logs. He liked to sit there in the morning, listening to the birds, watching the water, and thinking quietly. These moments of peace were important to him. In the city, he had rarely stopped to simply watch life around him. Here, every moment counted, and he learned to enjoy it fully. As winter approached, the forest changed again. Cold winds blew, and the leaves turned yellow and red. Armin harvested the last vegetables from his garden and stored them carefully. He built a small storage area inside the cabin for food and firewood. He also added extra stones around the cabin walls to protect it from cold winds. Winter was a challenge, but he was ready. He had learned from spring and summer, and he knew how to take care of himself. During one winter evening, as he sat by the fire, Armin thought about his life in the city. He remembered the stress, the noise, and the endless work. He realized how much he had changed since leaving. He was no longer dependent on traffic, offices, or machines. He relied on his hands, his mind, and the forest. He felt free, peaceful, and alive. The forest had given him something more valuable than money or comfort. It had given him life itself. Sometimes he thought about meeting people from the nearby village. He had learned that they respected his choice to live in the forest and sometimes brought him supplies or shared stories. They never interfered with his privacy, and Armin appreciated their quiet friendship. Knowing that humans could live nearby without disturbing him gave him a sense of safety. One day he decided to improve his cabin further. He made shelves for his tools, a small table for cooking, and a place to store seeds. The cabin became not just a shelter but a home. Each improvement made life easier and more enjoyable. He realized that building and caring for a home was as important as farming. Both required patience, effort, and planning. Armand also found joy in simple routines. Waking up with the sun, watering plants, cooking meals, observing animals, and sitting by the fire became part of his life. The repetition brought comfort, and he began to notice details he had never seen before. He learned the songs of the birds, the smells of the forest at different times, and the behavior of small animals. Nature became his teacher. As months turned into a year, Armand felt he had truly become part of the forest. He had built a home, a garden, and a life. He no longer missed the city. Its noise, buildings, and crowds were distant memories. The forest offered challenges, but it also offered beauty, lessons, and freedom. Armand had discovered a life where he could be himself, work with his hands, and enjoy every moment. By the end of the first year, the cabin was solid, the farm thriving, and Armand stronger and happier than ever. He knew the journey would continue, and each season would bring new challenges and joys. He was ready to face them, because he had learned to live with patience, care, and respect for the forest. The life he had built was simple, but it was rich with meaning. Armand woke with the first light of morning. The forest was calm, and the river nearby reflected the soft orange glow of the sun. The year had passed quickly, and he had grown accustomed to the rhythm of life in the woods. His cabin was strong, his garden thriving, and his connection with nature deeper than ever. Yet he knew that life in the forest was not without challenges. Each day brought new lessons, and today would be no different. As he stepped outside, he noticed the wind was stronger than usual. Some clouds hung low above the hills, dark and heavy. Armand decided to check the farm before the storm arrived. He carried buckets of water to the young plants and tied protective nets around the taller vegetables. The berries he had planted were ripening, and he carefully gathered the ones ready to eat. He smiled, proud of the work he had done over the past months. By late morning, the sky had grown darker, and distant rumbles of thunder echoed through the forest. Armand returned to the cabin and secured the door. He placed heavy stones near the walls and stacked firewood to keep warm. The storm hit suddenly. Rain poured in sheets, and strong wind shook the trees. Lightning flashed across the sky, and thunder followed in deep, rolling echoes. Armand stayed calm. He lit a small lamp, cooked a simple meal, and watched the storm from the safety of his cabin. The next day, he discovered some damage outside. Branches had fallen on the garden, and a few plants were broken. He spent hours clearing the debris and repairing the fences. It was hard work, but he felt accomplished. The storm had tested his preparation and resilience. He realized that living in the forest required not only skill but also constant attention. Nature could be gentle, but it could also be powerful. After repairing the damage, Armand decided to explore a new area of the forest. He wanted to find another water source for farming and possibly more land for crops. He packed a small bag, took his walking stick, and followed a narrow trail along the river. The forest was alive with sounds. Birds called to each other, squirrels moved through the trees, and a fox crossed his path. Armand felt excitement in discovering new places, knowing that the forest had more to offer than he had imagined. After walking for a long time, he came to a hidden clearing. The sunlight poured into the open space, and wildflowers grew in colorful patches. A small stream ran through the clearing, clear and fresh. Armand knelt to drink from it and noticed the soil near the stream was rich and soft. He knew immediately that this place could be perfect for expanding his farm. He marked the location in his notebook and began planning how he could use the land without disturbing the natural beauty of the forest. Returning to his cabin, Armand carried seeds and tools. Over the next few days, he worked on preparing the new land. He cleared small areas carefully, removing stones and branches without harming the existing plants. He planted vegetables and herbs and created small borders using rocks to protect the crops. The work was tiring, but it felt rewarding. The new farm was a chance to grow more food and learn new ways to work with the earth. One afternoon, while exploring the forest for more wild plants, Armand discovered a small cave hidden behind thick bushes. Curiosity filled him. He entered slowly, using a torch he carried. Inside, the cave was cool and dry. The walls had interesting patterns formed by water over many years. He found a few small crystals embedded in the rock and a tiny underground stream. Armand realized that this cave could provide shelter during harsh weather or a quiet place to rest and think. He marked it on his map and returned to the cabin. Armand also faced challenges with animals. One night he noticed tracks near the garden that did not belong to deer or rabbits. The next morning he found that some vegetables had been eaten. He decided to build a stronger fence using branches, stones, and vines. He also learned to make noise deterrents with small wooden chimes that would alert him if larger animals came close. Each challenge taught him new ways to protect his home while respecting the forest. As weeks passed, Armin's garden grew even more. He experimented with planting in rows, using compost from leaves and soil from the forest. He found that mixing natural soil with organic compost improved the growth of vegetables. He also collected seeds from wild plants to create diversity in his garden. Soon he had a small but productive farm with vegetables, herbs, and berries. Each harvest brought pride and satisfaction. The taste of fresh food from his own land felt different from anything he had known before. One day, while walking near the river, Armin noticed smoke in the distance. Curious, he decided to investigate carefully. He found a small family from the nearby village making a fire. They were friendly and welcomed him. They shared bread and fruit, and in return Armin gave them some vegetables from his garden. They talked about the forest, its challenges, and its wonders. Armin realized that even though he preferred solitude, these small human connections could be meaningful. The family respected his privacy, and he appreciated the balance between solitude and companionship. During the evening, Armin reflected on the past months. He remembered his life in the city and how tired he had felt. Now, despite storms, animal visits, and hard work, he felt alive, strong, and peaceful. The forest had tested him, taught him patience, and given him purpose. He realized that every challenge had made him more capable and confident. He understood that life required effort, but when effort was combined with respect for nature, it brought great rewards. As autumn arrived, the forest changed color. The trees turned yellow, red, and gold. Armin harvested vegetables and stored them carefully. He prepared the cabin for the coming cold months, stacking firewood, repairing walls, and adding extra stones for protection. Winter would be hard, but he was ready. He knew that preparation, observation, and care were essential for survival. The forest demanded respect, and Armin had learned to give it. One cold morning, he noticed smoke rising near the cave he had discovered earlier. Investigating carefully, he found a small group of travelers resting inside. They were polite and quiet. Armin shared some food with them and gave advice about safe paths. The travelers thanked him and moved on. This encounter reminded Armin that kindness and sharing were important even in solitude. Life in the forest was not only about survival, but also about respect and cooperation. During this time, Armin also improved his cabin further. He built shelves for storage, a small table for cooking, and a wooden platform for sleeping. The interior became warm, cozy, and practical. He realized that living well in the forest was not just about working outside, but also about creating comfort and safety inside. Each improvement made his daily life easier and more enjoyable. Armin began keeping a careful record of the weather, the growth of plants, and the behavior of animals. He learned to predict rain, changes in wind, and animal movements. These observations helped him plan farming, building, and even daily walks. He felt more in tune with the forest than ever before. Life had become a series of lessons, each connected to nature and his own effort. By the end of the fourth part of his journey, Armin had grown stronger, wiser, and more confident. He had learned to build, farm, observe, and respect the forest. Every storm, every animal visit, and every challenge had taught him patience, planning, and care. The forest was no longer just a place to escape. It had become a home, a teacher, and a friend. Armin knew that life in the forest required work, but it also gave back far more than he could imagine. He felt ready for whatever the coming seasons would bring, confident in his ability to live fully, peacefully, and wisely. Armin woke to a soft, golden sunrise. The forest was calm and the air smelled of earth and leaves. His cabin, built with his own hands, stood strong on the hill. The garden below was flourishing with vegetables, herbs, and berries. 1 year had passed since he had left the city. He looked around and felt a deep sense of satisfaction. Every stone he had lifted, every plant he had nurtured, and every challenge he had faced had led to this life. That morning he decided to explore further than before. He packed a small bag with water, fruit, and his notebook. Walking along the river, he noticed small changes in the forest. Some trees had grown taller while others had fallen and added to the rich soil. Birds were singing, and the deer he often saw now seemed accustomed to his presence. Armand smiled, realizing that life in the forest was not only about survival but also about learning and connection. While walking, he discovered a small pond hidden behind thick bushes. The water was still and clear, reflecting the sky above. He knelt to drink and noticed small fish swimming beneath the surface. The pond was perfect for watering plants during dry days and could also provide fresh fish for food. Armand felt excited. Every new discovery was a gift, and he felt grateful for the life he had chosen. Back at the cabin, he decided to expand his farm again. Using soil from the riverbank and compost from fallen leaves, he prepared new plots for planting. He added rows of beans, carrots, and small fruit trees. He carefully placed stones around the plots to protect them from wild animals. The work was tiring, but he felt fulfilled. The rhythm of digging, planting, and watering gave him a sense of peace that no city work had ever provided. Armand also began building simple tools and furniture for the cabin. He carved wooden shelves, a small table, and even a bench near the river. Each creation was useful and added comfort to his life. He discovered that working with his hands not only built his home, but also strengthened his mind and body. Patience, focus, and care were required, and each success filled him with quiet joy. One afternoon, while exploring a nearby hill, Armand found an old tree with a hollow trunk. Inside there were nests of small birds and tiny animals. He watched quietly, noting how the forest provided shelter and food for many creatures. This observation reminded him that his own life depended on respect for nature. The forest gave him everything, and in return he cared for it. He began thinking about planting more trees near the river and around his garden to create a balanced ecosystem. The seasons changed again, and Armand noticed how each brought unique beauty and challenges. Spring was full of flowers and young animals. Summer brought warmth and growth. Autumn painted the leaves in red and gold, and winter covered the forest with frost. He learned to prepare for each season, store food, and protect his cabin and crops. Life required planning, but the rewards were visible in the thriving garden, strong cabin, and abundant wildlife around him. One day, while walking near the pond, Armand noticed a fox caught in a small trap left by someone from the village. He approached carefully and released the animal. It ran into the forest but paused to look at him before disappearing. Armand felt a warm sense of responsibility. Living in the forest was not just about his own life. It was about respecting and protecting all creatures around him. Acts of kindness like this gave him a deeper connection with the forest and a sense of purpose beyond himself. As time passed, Armand began to refine his daily routines. He woke with the sun, tended the garden, cooked meals, observed animals, and kept notes in his notebook. The repetition created rhythm and peace. Each action had meaning, and each day brought small joys. The taste of fresh tomatoes, the sound of flowing water, the sight of deer drinking near the river. All these moments became treasures. He realized that happiness was not in wealth or comfort, but in attention, effort, and respect for life. During one quiet evening, Armand noticed smoke rising from the village in the distance. Curious, he decided to visit. He walked carefully and reached the village, where he was greeted warmly by the families he had met before. They shared bread and stories, and Armand told them about his life in the forest. The villagers admired his independence and skill. Armand realized that even though he lived in solitude, a connection with people was valuable. He could enjoy the forest fully but still be part of a larger community. Back at the cabin, he began thinking about the future. He wanted to live sustainably, relying on the forest without harming it. He planned to plant more trees, create water storage, and improve his garden further. Each idea brought him energy and hope. The forest had already taught him patience, strength, and joy, and he knew that with careful effort, life could grow even richer. Armand also found joy in the small wonders around him. He watched the stars at night, noting constellations he had never seen in the city. He listened to the gentle rustle of leaves and the river's flow, learning to recognize patterns and rhythms in nature. Each day offered lessons if he paid attention. He learned when animals were active, when rain was coming, and how to make the most of sunlight for his crops. Life became a combination of observation, effort, and enjoyment. One morning, he noticed that his vegetables were growing faster than before. He harvested carrots, beans, and tomatoes, storing some for winter. He planted new seeds in the freshly prepared soil, thinking about the next season. Farming had become more than survival. It was a creative act. He experimented with arrangements, crop rotations, and even mixed wild plants with cultivated ones. Each new idea brought success or failure, but both taught him important lessons. Winter arrived quietly, covering the forest in frost and soft white snow. Armin stored extra firewood, prepared warm clothes, and cooked meals that would last for days. The river flowed under a thin layer of ice, and the forest was still. He sat inside the cabin by the fire, reflecting on the year. He had grown strong, capable, and wise. The city he had left seemed like a distant memory. Here he had freedom, purpose, and peace. During the cold months, he discovered ways to make life easier. He built a small wooden shelter near the garden to protect plants from frost. He collected and stored seeds carefully, planning for spring. He made tools from fallen wood and stones. Every task, no matter how small, had meaning. Even in winter, life in the forest was fulfilling. He realized that effort and attention were the keys to comfort and joy. As the first flowers of spring appeared, Armin felt renewed energy. He began planting again, repairing fences and watching animals return. Life in the forest continued, steady and rewarding. He no longer feared solitude. Instead, he embraced it. He had learned to rely on himself, respect nature, and find happiness in simple work. The forest was not only his home but also his teacher, guide, and friend. One evening, Armin sat on the bench near the river. The sky was painted with colors of sunset. He looked at the cabin, the garden, and the forest around him. Everything he had built, learned, and cared for stood as proof of his journey. He had left the city tired and stressed, searching for peace. In the forest, he had found not just peace but mastery, strength, and a deep connection with life. He understood that the effort he had invested returned more than he had ever imagined. Armin smiled, feeling a sense of fulfillment he had never known before. Life in the forest was not easy, but it was real. Every day brought challenges, discoveries, and small joys. The river flowed, the trees grew, animals wandered freely, and the seasons continued their endless cycle. Armin was no longer just a visitor in the forest. He had become part of it. His cabin, his garden, and his careful observations were proof of a life lived fully, with purpose, respect, and love for the world around him. He knew that this life was only the beginning. Each season would bring new lessons, new plants, and new opportunities to grow. He had learned patience, courage, and observation. He had learned that true freedom came from effort, care, and connection. The forest had transformed him, and he was grateful. Armin looked at the stars appearing above, listening to the river flowing and the wind in the trees. His heart was calm, his mind clear, and his spirit strong. He had found the life he had been searching for, a life of simplicity, beauty, and harmony.